All right, we're coming into what I have as our last game that we're going to talk about. Another game, kind of all the games that we were looking at had kind of CFP college football playoff implications. This is TCU at BYU, so going up to Provo to play the Cougars. The spread on this right now is BYU -4.5. Over under is 51.5. TCU obviously coming off a loss that was surprising, to say the least. Didn't foresee them losing that game last week, and BYU kind of trying to bounce back after that Texas Tech game. So let's just get right into it. What is in-season AI telling you?
Yeah, INSZN AI is saying that BYU has a 61% chance of winning this game. Typically, that's kind of equates to a spread of around a touchdown, so we're a little bit more in line versus some of the other games we have previewed this week. But look, it has BYU winning at about a 61% chance, and so that's kind of, I think the AI is fairly in line with what the Vegas line is for right now. This is a very good BYU team. Obviously had a loss against Texas Tech last week, but has handled their opponents throughout the season fairly well. This is a TCU team that's been okay. They're 6-3. They're pretty average in terms of offense and defense. 34th in SP plus offense and 47th in defense, whereas BYU's 39th in offense and 19th in defense. So there's no huge high-level takeaways I'm seeing here that provides indication one way or the other, and saying that, TCU is going to be able to pull off the upset, especially it being in Provo. I think, even lends to BYU a little bit more here. But, if we look at kind of the high-level metrics, TCU's offense has been pretty solid, but BYU has, been pretty effective at shutting down their opponents this year, especially in the passing game. TCU is averaging about 303 passing yards per game. BYU gives about 192. And then on the run game, TCU is getting about 123 rushing yards per game. BYU's allows around 131. So BYU's rushing defense isn't great, but their coverage defense is pretty solid, and I think will limit what Hoover's able to do. So they're gonna maybe have to think about switching up their game plan a little bit in terms of maybe having to set up the run a little bit more in terms of opening up their passing game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and that's kind of what last thing I kind of wanted to get into about this game, or what I really wanted to get into is, both these teams lost last week, kind of showed neither of them was very good offensively in their games. Kind of, I watched both of them. TCU kind of, had a shot at the end, but really was not their typical offensive,
Yeah.
high-powered offense self. And BYU the same way. Just Tech really stopped them offensively. And I know that game was 26-9, but it could
Yeah.
have been 40-9, 40-50-9. It was Tech just had control over that game. So if you're the offensive coordinator for TCU or BYU, what are you trying to do to, just based on headline grades and all of that? I kind of have BYU pulled up. Their coverage defense B plus, pass rush defense C, run defense D plus. So if I'm BYU, I'm trying to get Bear and LJ Martin and all of our rushing threats started early and kind of in a groove early. But I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts, just looking at some of the headline grades and all of that.
Yeah, if I'm looking at the headline grades, especially, we'll start with BYU first, then go to TCU. So if I'm TCU and I'm looking at the headline grades and saying, hey, coverage is B plus, that kind of limits Hoover's ability a little bit passing the ball. Pass rush defense is a C, so not a huge threat in terms of getting pressure at the quarterback, but definitely still able to do that. But the run defense is being D plus, 37th percentile, which is not great. TCU is able to put the ball on the ground and run effectively. I think that's going to be their main, ability to actually pull the coverage in, set up the run game to ultimately set up the passing game. So if I'm TCU in that perspective, that's how I'm thinking about this game. And now from BYU's perspective, let's look at TCU's headline grades.
Yeah, and this is kind of where I wanted this conversation to go, because this surprised me as I was looking. A plus run defense from
Yeah,
TCU. So
really.
talk about that.
Yeah. So what this is basically saying is TCU is, probably one of the top 2 to 3 run defenses in the country this year. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they limit the rushing yards of their opponents as much, but they're able to effectively stop the run. They're able to, look at the schema and effectively, change their defensive coordination, defensive play style in terms of protecting, a lot of efficient yards on the ground. So that's kind of one of the biggest surprises that I have of TCU this year is even though they're, 6-3, they have one of the best rush defenses in the country this year. And they also have a pretty solid coverage defense as well. B-, it's around the 40th percentile this year. So, if I'm BYU and I'm thinking, hey, we're going to have to rely on Bear a lot to get a lot of the yards through the air, what does that actually mean in terms of their offensive schema or their offensive play style, play calling that they're going to run this year? Because BYU's been pretty effective in having the run game, setting up the pass game this year, but kind of flipping the script a little bit and saying, hey, we might have to be a pass-first offense in order to get, those chunk yards, chunk plays in order to put up anything against TCU. That's kind of the one main thing I'm looking at.
Yeah, and kind of, I'm glad this conversation happened because that's where I wanted it to go. Kind of the if I'm just in my mind's eye thinking of TCU offensively, they're kind of a better pass team. And Josh Hoover, is a phenomenal quarterback. Josh Hoover is a phenomenal quarterback, and they kind of want him to lead the offense. Kind of on the dichotomy between TCU and BYU is Bear is a good quarterback. He's very young, and they want him and the run game to kind of set up, like you said, the pass and everything else.
Yeah.
TCU's defense is best against the run. BYU's defense is best against the pass. So that's why this kind of spread at 51.5. I could see this game going under. I mean, both defenses kind of their bread and butter is going to be what the other offense wants to rely on. So this could be a game that ends up like 20-17 or, 24-21, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is also why our prediction model might have, hey, we think this is going to be a lower scoring affair than we previously thought, which is why it kind of aligns a little bit more with the spread we're seeing at 4.5. If I think the defenses, were a little bit more lackadaisical in terms of being able to stop the, offensive superiority of both teams, I think you'd obviously the over-under being higher. And also the spread being a little bit wider, but I kind of what you're saying again with the defenses having the specialties against what the offenses are being able to put up and have put up this year. I think that's why you're seeing a little bit of that compression of the spread.
Yeah, no, I agree. So no matter what, I'm excited to watch. It'll be kind of the 9:00 game that I'll have on. So I'm excited about that. Anyway, just kind of wanted to say, this was great. We always enjoy INSZN College Football Show each week. This was our Week 12 preview. Any TCU fans, any BYU Cougar fans, Big 12 fans, college football fans, please check us out on INSZN.co. Follow, like, subscribe, comment with anything you want to see from us, any additional content, any questions, just anything. And please, like I said, check us out at INSZN.co. or INSZNCFB.com. This was our Week 12 preview. I'm Braxton Wilkes, and that's Christian Berry, kind of co-founders of INSZN, and we will see you next week.